All right, so let's go to our next submitter. I think it's BitPrime with Gary Hughes. So let's go there. So for those looking for the submission, it's a bit further down on the agenda. A substantial submission.
Good morning, Mr. Chair and members. Can you hear me?
I can indeed. Gary, thanks very much for coming along. And I did have a read of your submission, and it's comprehensive.
That's all right. Look, I must say right at the outset, I'm not the key submitter. That's Ross, who's just joining, Ross Carter-Brown. I'm really here in a supportive capacity if members would like to discuss any aspects relating to anti-money laundering and regulatory, which is my field of expertise. I'm an independent barrister and I've worked in that area for about 11 or 12 years. But the star of the show is not me. I propose to do very little talking. I see Ross has just popped up there.
Okay, well, let's go to the star.
Ross is Chief Executive of BitPrime, which is one of the sort of 2 or 3 leading trading exchanges for cryptocurrency in New Zealand. So over to you, Ross.
Kia ora, Ross. Look, I'll just say, whilst we might have some flexibility, we've set aside 10 minutes, including any questions. So I just want to let you know we are under some time constraints, but thanks for being early as well. Over to you.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I should only take 4 or 5 minutes for my oral submission and then we can go to questions. Kia ora, everyone. Thanks for inviting me here today. Mr. Chair, members, my name's Ross Carter-Brown. I'm the Chief Executive of BitPrime. As Gary said, we're one of the major trading platforms in New Zealand. I'll just give you a little bit of context where we fit in the wider market. So BitPrime is a New Zealand-based cryptocurrency trading exchange that has been in operation since March 2017. We have 2 platforms under our umbrella. So we provide a non-custodial platform for the retail market, and we also provide a professional OTC desk for institutions and high net worth customers. For context, non-custodial simply means that the customers or users have direct control over the funds, so they hold the assets in their own wallets rather than them being held by BitPrime. I truly believe that we are an example of a Kiwi success story. Started in 2017, just myself. A very small initial investment, and we've grown to over 30 staff across 4 different countries, and that's with no outside investment to date. So just to place us within that market, our trading volume is in the we're looking at between 100 and 120 million NZD by the end of this financial year. That's domestically. And our platform has 46,000 users, predominantly New Zealand based. We estimate that the domestic market is very large and growing very quickly. Estimated trading volumes in New Zealand are between 300 and 400 million New Zealand dollars per annum, and that does exclude funds that Kiwis might be sending directly overseas to offshore exchanges. As some of the other submitters have raised, Jonty and Mark, there are some big advantages or potential advantages to the New Zealand economy from this industry. For example, we're contributing to the economy with minimal environmental impact. We don't directly mine anything. We have no distance to transport or to overseas markets, and we're almost entirely cloud-based. So I think that overcomes a lot of the issues we have around the heavy reliance on primary industries. On the compliance side, we work closely and collaboratively with a range of regulators and law enforcement that includes DIA, Internal Affairs, Inland Revenue, the Financial Markets Authority, and we also work with various departments within the police, including the FIU. We are fully compliant with AML CFT legislation, tax and other regulatory requirements. I believe on the compliance sides, we are one of the top performers in the industry in this part of the world. One point I really want to...
In your submission, you talk a lot about the need for different and enhanced regulation. Can you talk to that part of your submission? Because I think it's something we haven't heard a lot about.
Absolutely, I can speak to that. Thank you, Mr. Chair. So we already have in New Zealand, I kind of define the regulatory framework in kind of three pillars. So you have your anti-money laundering side of things. The second pillar is tax or tax legislation or regulations. And the third is financial markets law. I think we already have, under existing regulations, a fairly comprehensive framework with taxation and with anti-money laundering. The missing part is the financial markets legislation. That causes some barriers to accessing banking services for ourselves and many of our competitors. And that's a major stumbling block. But the thing is, we already have some quite comprehensive regulations in other areas, and they are quite well enforced in New Zealand, which I think is a good thing. I mean, one of the reasons why New Zealand excels in the business world is because of our international standing, low corruption, and strong personal property rights. That's can be a plus, but we're also competing on an international level against jurisdictions that have weaker regulation, or they have strong regulation that they don't enforce. So I think we just have to be careful that while I think there is some additional regulation required, particularly around custody, I think any new regulations or legislation shouldn't just focus on controlling things. It should also keep in mind that we have this fantastic opportunity and we need to facilitate innovation. And I think when we support these new burgeoning industries that don't have that distance to market issue, unlocks huge benefit or potentially huge benefits for the economy. And I think one fantastic success story is the film industry in New Zealand, and how there have been significant tax breaks and subsidies and things like that, and that's brought in probably billions of dollars into the economy. And that's just one example where that approach has worked well.
I see we've got a couple of other questions. We've got Helen White there, and then we'll go to Andrew Bailey.
Hi, I'm going to cheat and ask you two at the same time. The first thing that I want to know is, you've talked about fostering, or we've heard other submitters as well talk about fostering this industry. What are the kind of crossover industries that would come with it? And the other is just on this issue of regulation. There must be a place for a sort of international regulation of this, because it's outside in some ways of the boundaries of one state.
So two excellent questions there. I'll start off with your question about how we could foster it. Earlier submitters did, I think, mention some tax breaks. I think that could be a very good approach. But that doesn't have to be solely on the financial transactions. If we're talking about different cryptocurrency transactions, it could also be tax breaks for startups that are have some fantastic concepts that need a little bit of a push or a lift to get things going. That could be great. And we could also provide tax breaks to companies, successful people in the fintech space, to move their operations to New Zealand. I think we could really establish a hub, and as some people have already suggested about trying to bring in more high-tech workers and things like that, while my preference is to support local training and development, if we can establish an initial hub that creates huge training opportunities and funding and things for training Kiwis for these roles. So yes.
Sorry, just wondering if I chip in on Helen's second question.
Sure.
If you're about to start on that.
I was.
That was just about the international regulation. It's a good question. Ideally, there would be some kind of international body. There isn't yet. There's discussion and moves, I think, underway, but that's probably going to take years. What we have now is different countries trying to offer forms of license and figure out what their own domestic regulation should look like, and people are approaching that in various ways. The Australian Senate report that was mentioned sets out a pretty clear set of recommendations for the Aussies. We have in New Zealand quite a fragmented looking regulatory framework, including the FMA doing a little bit, the Department of Internal Affairs, FSP registration, but we don't have a single form of license. If you look at, say, the UK, they've had a thing called an electronic money license for years, actually, predates cryptocurrency, really. And so I think if we were to start off with what can New Zealand control, then going down that form of a proper, well-organised license might be a start, because we can't control what's going to happen internationally.
All right, let's go to Andrew Bailey.
Hey, yeah, thanks, guys. Hey, a lot of people have spoken about how valuable this sector is and growing. That's all good. There's two things that we need to probably get our hands around is what do we need to make sure in terms of regulation that doesn't kill off what could otherwise be a very valuable industry. And then secondly, you're talking about tax breaks, which really I put in the camp of what could we do to further promote the industry. Gary, you're a lawyer. What would be really useful around the regulations? What are the things that we've got to make sure we don't do that will actually kill the industry dead in New Zealand, or mean that it's just becomes a small industry and never really has the potential to grow properly? That's the focus. I'd be really keen, and I don't know whether you'd have time after the submission to come back and be much clearer about what's good and what things we shouldn't do, because I think that would be really helpful for the committee.
Certainly willing to do that. I know we're pressed for time today. I guess I'd say two things. It's not often you get, I'm an external advisor to BitPrime, it's not often you get a business saying, please, can we be regulated? But they really want it to be done in the right way, not something that crystallizes the regulatory rules at a point in time, i.e. now, because this is moving and changing so fast. I mean, even between writing a submission back in November and where we are now in February, there's new developments and things happening all the time. So it needs to be a work in progress that can keep up with technology, in my view. And I think one suggestion Ross has made is that establishing a sort of interdisciplinary working group of people who are at the coalface to assist Parliament in coming up with better regulation would be a good start to make sure we're not freezing in something now that might be out of date in 9 months.
Could I just jump in there too, Gary, just to add to that? I think an approach similar to what's been taken with the AML CFT Act 2009 is a good one, which is rather than having a rules-based approach, you have a risk or principle-based approach. That makes the regulation or legislation flexible, because any law you write, well, perhaps it's not going to be reviewed for 10 years, and that's a century in this industry. So I think risk-based rather than rules-based approach is essential.
Yeah, good point. Thanks, Ross.
All right. Look, we've got a moment if you want to make any concluding comments, but as I said before, your submission is comprehensive, and and I must say that recommendations are clear and really useful.
Yep, thank you. I guess I'd just like to finish on emphasising that this doesn't just have to be a solely regulatory approach. It's also an opportunity for us to really grow this industry and create a lot of value for the economy that doesn't rely on all these issues we have with primary industry. Thank you, everyone.
All right. Ross, thank you very much, and thanks to you for that very good submission. And we will now go to our next submitter, who is on finality.
Yeah, thank you.